Today, we're going to talk about my uncle's favorite conspiracy theory, chemtrails. There are... Oh my God.
Well, all right.
Oh God.
You can really see the professionalism.
All right, start over. Here we go. So today we're going to talk about my uncle's favorite conspiracy theory, chemtrails. So these are the white cloud-like lines left behind from airplanes, and they are pretty much the star of conspiracy theories, since they are crux for several of them. Hello everybody, and welcome to Just Nah Science Podcast. Each episode we debunk ridiculous yet common science misconceptions we find online and get just a little salty about them. I'm your favorite science teacher, Lauren.
And I am the world's greatest neuroscientist, Nick. Before we get started, I know, it's the hubris.
You didn't say that.
Before we get started, we would really appreciate you subscribing and leaving a thumbs up on this episode. Positive ratings and shares, things like that, 5-star reviews on Apple, CastBox, whatever you're listening to, help us tremendously. So if you want to support our show and you want to do it super easy and most of all free, then leaving a positive rating is the best way to do it. And we thank you very much.
So it won't take long on social media to find someone talking about the hazards of chemtrails. I've seen people posting pictures of the sky with crisscross patterns, with some comments about the government is poisoning us and turning our sky into a gas chamber. If you think that's extreme, welcome to the world of conspiracy theories. I'm glad you can join us.
Yeah, and there's punch and chips in the back if you're new here.
I was like, wait,
stupid.
where's he going with it?
that was so stupid. I'm sorry.
I like that, actually.
So first, let's answer the question: what is a chemtrail? Lauren kind of answered that already in the intro. But if you look up at the sky, you'll see planes passing by, most likely. And as planes pass by, it creates lines trailing the plane, like these white smoke trails almost. Some people believe these lines are not simple byproducts of a plane passing by, but have a more sinister purpose.
Yeah, some speculate that they are for mind control, population control, and weather modification. So there are some individuals who believe that the government is spraying chemicals to block heat and harmful radiation from the sun to combat climate change. And this is called geochemical modification, also known as albedo modifications.
Which I think is interesting that people think the government would do something like this for a noble cause, but most of the time the reasons are mostly nefarious, and these conspiracies of people trying to be exposed to these chemicals, or people think that the government exposing people to these chemtrails is done as part of a secret project by the government or some other global entity.
The Illuminati.
Like the Illuminati, for sure. I'm sure that's someone thinks that. But what is supposedly in these chemicals, or in these chemtrails rather, that make them harmful?
Or that potentially do, right? We're not saying these chemtrails are real.
Well, that's why I said what's supposedly in these. And answers will, of course, vary, but it's often things like aluminum and barium, other metals, and things that you see people who are very health conscious or worried about taking up metals from things like deodorant. These are really common targets for people to be like, it's poison. And like, I'm not going to put aluminum under my armpits. I'm going to use a natural deodorant. That doesn't work.
I've tried so many
They
natural
don't.
ones, and you stink after 5 minutes.
Listen,
I'm sorry.
I love you guys. If you're listening, I love you and I appreciate you. But if you're using the natural deodorant, you got to put it on every hour. I think that's just how you're going to be buying so much deodorant.
I know. Listen, I get it. I've tried many. I want them to work. No one's cracked the code yet. But anyway, so what separates a chemtrail from normal plane emissions? So if the line produced by the plane stays around for too long and forms what's called a cirrus cloud, which are those like flat clouds that have long, wispy kind of strands, well, those are chemtrails. Right?
That's what people say are chemtrails. So what made people even start to believe in chemtrails? It started in the mid-1990s. In 1996, the U.S. Air Force published a hypothetical paper on using aircraft spraying for tactical advantages. Since then, woke individuals have been alarmed and almost like empowered in a way by chemtrails. though to date there has not been any significant paper or testing done that was ever published by the government or some other scientist or group. And I know what you're going to say. If you're a believer in chemtrails, it's classified information. They're not going to tell us if they're doing it or whatever. But the question is, why would the government want to do this to begin with?
So we've mentioned some reasons earlier, but some people speculate that it's weather modification to force crop failures, which would then influence the stock market. So this is a really bold claim because agriculture isn't just any part of the stock market, right? It's a fundamental building block. So changing the price of commodities like crops can have effects on the stock market and consumer pricing. And that's all we'll really say on the financial aspect, since we are not stockbrokers or stock market experts by any means. But some individuals truly think that we'll have to grow all of our own crops in like underground tunnels.
I'm sure that if you just heard that, you can see some of the potential problems with growing crops underground, like irrigation, soil, light, proper oxygen levels. But for some reason they think that it's a viable option, and maybe to a small degree it is, but you know how much agriculture space there is? Most of the agriculture in America is to feed cattle or feed livestock. You're not going to put all of that underground. I can guarantee it.
It's going to take way too much energy to create that system. Who's digging all these tunnels?
Yeah.
Right? The amount of energy we need to do that digging, to put the light, like get special lights underground to run the electricity on, I don't know, whatever.
Yeah, it's
so much
crazy.
Infrastructure goes into that.
And I never really understood the mind control and sterilization aspects. If there's mind control substances in the air that we breathe all the time because of, planes are passing by all the time, it sure as hell isn't working. No. Do you think that Trump, of all people, if he had the ability to control people's minds, you don't think he'd do it?
And then he'd be reelected.
Yeah, exactly. Even if you're a Trump supporter, you got to admit that he would definitely be trying to control people's minds. And again, the population control thing doesn't make sense. We've talked about this before on previous episodes. But if the government wanted to curb the population to conserve resources and reduce the burden on the planet, why aren't there bigger government efforts to reduce impacts by climate change? Why are so many politicians pro-life? These completely contradict the population control theory, because the government's not doing anything to control the population.
Right.
If anything, all you see are shows like 19 and Counting and stuff like that. They
really encourage you.
Yeah.
Have exponential growth of your own genes. Oh my God, those people are crazy.
No, listen, you want a big family, that's your priority. 19 is a lot, though.
They just start walking out by the end.
Well, no, that's not nice.
When you have up to 3 kids, it's such a faster delivery. Really, my aunt was telling me 3 kids. She's like, "Our third one, they just slide right out."
Okay, that's anecdotal evidence at best, and also it's still not nice to say.
Just saying, it gets a lot easier.
Okay, move on.
All right, so let's not forget the fact that a government gets money through taxes as well. So if there's less people from population control, there's fewer people to pay taxes. So why would the government want that? It's kind of a load of shit. So but hear me on this. I was thinking this. Maybe people are saying, when they say population control, maybe they really mean like mind control.
But again, obviously that
controlling the population through the mind.
Right. I go an unseen puppet master, I guess.
Yes.
But it doesn't. Listen, it's not working. It truly isn't, right? Because the country is incredibly divided on most, policies or most aspects of life or whatever, laws and anything. So what's going to be like, what's the argument that it only works on half the people? It only works if you let it. It only works on people of above or below a certain intelligence or demographic. Like, you can break this down in so many different ways that it just is not feasible.
Just like all the ballots were fraudulent, But all the other elections that occurred on that ballot, nobody's contesting those, only the presidential one. But they all came from the same ballot.
Yeah, and listen,
doesn't make sense.
This is not the time to be talking about the election, but yeah, there's a lot of issues with it. Also, like, show proof, right? But anyway, with all this said, you would think that there probably isn't a lot of people who believe in chemtrails, right? Well, according to a survey from 2016, 30 to 40% of Americans are believers in chemtrails. 30 to 40%. And I don't know how much, like to what degree, this survey said are believers. Do they believe it a little bit, or do they think it's happening? I don't really know. But even if it's 30 to 40% think that chemtrails are a possibility, that's still so many.
It's way too many.
And if you're wondering why are there so many people who believe this, I will bet whatever you want to bet that it is directly linked to things like Facebook groups or Facebook in general. And I barely use Facebook for anything, even the podcast. So if you follow us on Facebook, I'm sorry, follow us on Twitter. But there have been a few articles posted by different media outlets, and you can find the links to those and every other source we use on our website in the show notes. And they talk to individuals who were convinced that chemtrails are real by Facebook posts or by Facebook groups. These are people who didn't even know chemtrails existed, or maybe didn't believe in them to begin with. And then they spend a decent amount of time on Facebook where there's,
going down the rabbit hole.
Yeah, there's just, incredibly educational and scientific ideas being exchanged there. So
I'm pretty sure, I want to say I recently read an article that they think the majority of misinformation and misconceptions like chemtrails come mainly from just Facebook.
Yeah, I believe it. I believe it totally. And
it's weird because it's like, who's mainly using Facebook?
Well, listen, let's not start to point fingers like that until we have better data. Then we can get our pitchforks. But
like my mom. That's what I'm getting at.
But one of the articles I was reading in doing research for this was a woman, and she's very concerned about the environment, which is great, right? It's great to be interested in the environment, making sure that your grandkids or your children have a future on the planet. Incredible. And she voted for Trump because she saw a fake tweet saying that Trump was going to end chemtrails. Meanwhile, that was never said. It was a fake tweet. And when she was told that it was fake, she's like, well, how am I supposed to know? She's like, I'm not trained in identifying credible sources and stuff. I'm a 50, 60-year-old woman. I just see it and I think, oh wow. And it's like, damn, but like, I don't even know where I'm going with this. Really, it's incredible to see, or to think that people can see something
and base like what I would think is a pretty big decision, voting for our president, off of just that, without having any other thing to back it up.
And also, like, to think that chemtrails are a thing without doing any sort of, even just a simple Google search, right? Like, you don't have to do crazy
Actual
investigative research and looking at peer-reviewed studies. For some things you do, but for a quick question like, are chemtrails real? You can probably answer the question with a Google search.
So what really are those lines in the sky from planes? Well, those lines are actually called condensation trails, or contrails. So they're formed when hot plane exhaust fumes basically condenses into ice crystals in the cold, dry, high altitude air. Very high up there, it's very cold. So this is basically, you're almost watching dew point happen in real time. All right, so because dew point is the temperature that the air, or in this case, the plane's exhaust, would need to be cooled down to in order for the water vapor within the air to condense, changing from a gas to a liquid. So you're seeing that literally happen. And when this happens, the air is saturated, reaches what's called max capacity, and clouds, fog, or dew can start forming.
It's the same reason why when it's cold, you can see your breath. It's the same principles being applied. but on an individual scale and something that you can see with your own eyes.
So depending on atmospheric conditions, they can stay thin lines that evaporate quickly, or they could spread out over a longer period of time and turn into those cirrus clouds that we mentioned earlier. I won't bore you with the different conditions that are responsible for changing patterns of chemtrails, of contrails. Caught myself there. But I'm sure there's a YouTube video explaining it if you are interested.
There are a ton of articles that promote chemtrails as fact, and they talk about, quote, people not seeing the patterns in the skies when they were kids growing up in the 60s and 70s. And here are just 3 issues I have with that type of claim.
Just 3.
Just 3. We'll keep it simple. 1, planes are not the same now as they were in the 60s and 70s.
True.
Flight patterns are not the same. There are more routes, more destinations, and more planes in the sky.
True.
3, if an individual makes this claim, it is anecdotal evidence at best. And even if someone did look at historic flight data, just see points 1 and 2. Also, what kind of kid is really taking note of these kind of things? Like, who's looking up at the sky and being like, today there are very few lines in the sky. What the hell is this? There are 3 streaks in the sky now, and they have not dissipated after 4. I'm timing it. It is 4 minutes and 44 seconds. Like, no one's doing that.
No kid is doing that whatsoever, unless you are a prodigy in aviation and plan on becoming a pilot at age 10. You're not doing that. I'm sorry.
Don't put me on a plane with a kid who's the pilot is age 10.
He's a prodigy.
I don't care. You need to be a little grizzled for me to get on that plane. Anyway,
little grizzled.
It's this idea that, like, when you look back on the 60s and 70s, if you were a child then, when you think about, like, going outside and playing and stuff.
Contrails are really at the center of your memories.
Yeah, like, when you think about, like, a beautiful day, no one pictures it with clouds. Like, you picture it as a nice, bright blue sky. It was a beautiful day. There wasn't a cloud in sight. That's how people are going to remember it, with rose-tinted glasses. It's nostalgia. So it's going to make, even if there weren't as many, again, I can't stress this enough, there are just a lot more planes right now. And so, yeah, you'll probably see more lines and more contrails than you would have in the 60s and 70s, just from that alone. And, again, I read a lot of these articles, and anytime an article starts off with, I'm not a conspiracy theorist, but it's probably not the most reliable source. It's not a reliable sauce either.
Definitely not a reliable sauce.
If the author feels obligated to defend their credibility by stating that they're not a conspiracy theorist at the beginning of the article, it's probably not your best source.
It reminds me of people who, again, on Facebook are like, you guys know I never really post anything like this, and then it's like this huge chain thing. I'm like, you post like things like this all the time. What are you talking about? You made this chain post, actually.
Most of the time it's not even like it's just not even their post. It's just like one of those copy pastas.
Copy pastas?
Yeah, that you don't know what copy pasta is?
No, I've never heard that term in my life.
Okay. Copy pasta is basically a slang copy paste.
I thought just because you had just said sauce, I'm thinking of pasta and sauce.
No, that's way too clever for me.
Copy pasta. Holy shit. My world has been busted wide open.
Copy pasta is a real thing. I promise you.
Okay. Well, I'm definitely Googling that right after this. But I did, being that my background is really in environmental science, I wanted to put this side note in here. So it is important to mention, though, that contrails or condensation trails do have a negative impact on the environment in the terms of like climate change and emissions. So air travel is a big and one of the biggest contributors to climate change by releasing carbon dioxide emissions, and by those cirrus clouds formed by contrails, they actually are really good at trapping heat. So over time, there's like this compound effect of all these planes. Like you think, oh, well, just a little streak in the sky. It's one plane. But really, over the hours, the thousands and thousands of planes that take off and land every day, this warms the Earth's surface below. And so we've talked about ways to reduce, your carbon footprint in our clothes donation episode, which was season 1, episode 50. So if you want to learn more about that, definitely check out that episode.
Yeah, it's important to know that, yes, planes do have a role in our environment, and it's not a great one, but it's not for the reasons that people think. It's not chemtrails, it's not population controls or killing off crops,
but people will believe that, but not believe that it releases CO2 emissions or that climate change is real. That's what boggles my mind.
Yeah, I can't speak to that. Unfortunately, I don't know. What I will say though is I don't want to guarantee it, right? I'm hoping that after listening to this episode, maybe you'll be a little bit more skeptical. Maybe you'll be a little more skeptical about contrails or chemtrails, and you'll question some things you see. One of the things that I've seen people say was like, well, I've seen pictures of planes with no pilots, and it's just a big tank in the pilot seat or in the cockpit, and it's just spraying chemicals. And it's like, no, that's a water barrel. It's a weight that they use to see how much flight dynamics and stuff, because that's what they use to as counterweights or like weights for planes, is just water barrels.
If you're a pilot, please contact us.
Listen.
Tell us more about this.
I'm sure they could use other things for test flights and stuff like that, and logistics and all that.
They should put a really heavy dummy in there, putting the middle finger up, so that when people take pictures of this, it's like, fuck you. I'm a dummy. I'm not a freaking chemical vat spraying.
That would be very. You just see, but you got to put a gas mask on them.
So all your Facebookers who zoom in with their cameras are like, oh, we got them now. What the hell is that?
I think it would be great if you did put a dummy with a gas mask and be like, stay inside tonight, a little sign.
God. No, please, people.
No, don't do that. And not that someone who you think someone from Delta is going to be listening to this. I'm like, oh, it's a pretty good idea. We should. No, they're not going to. No one's going to do that. No one from the Department of Defense is like, yeah, let's fuck with the civilians. But I do think that's going to do it for us today. If you enjoyed this episode, don't forget to subscribe, leave a review, and especially share it. It takes literal seconds to hit subscribe and click the 5-star review button, and it would mean a whole lot to us. Positive ratings and shares on social media are the biggest ways you can help us spread this good science to even more people. You can find us on Twitter, Instagram, and Facebook at Just Nat Science. You can also visit our website, justnatscience.com, where you can watch YouTube videos, read blog posts, or submit questions and suggest topics for future episodes. Lauren's laughing because you can hear the dog running in the background.
Don't forget, guys, we put out new episodes every Tuesday. And as always, thanks for listening.
Later, nerds.
Later, Gators.